So, are we all asleep? Because I am, okay? So if I fall asleep over here on the stage, it's fine, right? Yes, so I'll be slightly different probably than the rest. So I will be talking more about psychology, subconsciousness, various aspects of sensory perception, not really about digital or UX, but just really about understanding human and understanding how to put certain of those elements of how we are built as human beings into your design processes. So, okay, this is not very human, right? If we have to put a robot to tell us how we need to find our way around a shopping center or an airport or something like that, it doesn't really engage us, but it also shows me a fundamental thing that that place is designed not according to how our brain naturally analyzes environments. So if an environment was designed that, you know, in a way that we could intuitively find ourselves around it and find where we need to go, we wouldn't need that, right? But also, we're not going to engage with that. It's not going to attract us. It's going to feel a little bit cold. We can't build a relationship with the brand if that comes through a robot, right? This is not very human. It's happening already. Those are digital check-ins at Citizen M hotels. And there's more and more of that happening in hotels where you sort of don't have any human to ask questions about. You might potentially have a concierge, but that's already being also replaced a lot of the times with apps or something like that. But isn't it actually better to find things from a human being? So Airbnb has been started really on that principle. Try a real environment, an environment in which humans really live, a culture that you can experience through a human because you can ask a question to your host, you can meet them, right? That's a little bit more human approach, not that. That is a good fad, but it's not a long-term design. Okay, this one. It's happening more and more, right? Is that a relationship? Who would say it's a relationship? Are you already married? No, good. Don't get married. Have you bought a ring? Yeah. Okay, reevaluate it, okay? But honestly, how can you connect with a person if you don't even look them in the eye? Right? If you don't understand what are their emotions, if you don't understand if they're scared, or if they, you know, excited, or if they just want to F you right now, how can you see it if you look on a screen, right? We kind of designed emojis for a little bit of that reason, right? The emojis really were there, so we were using sort of punctuation marks of various sorts, right, at the beginning when the sort of mobile phone started and texting it. And then we sort of added you know, emojis just to sort of put a little bit of a human into the digital interactions. But it's not enough. There's so much more about us as human beings. Things like love, compassion, kindness, even basic understanding. We can't put that in digital. Maybe at some point there will be. But honestly, do we want it in digital? And also, it will be way too difficult, way too complex to design it. And people still won't want to use it. So maybe let's start with a little bit more simple things. I'm not asking you to design compassion up, you know, but let's start with something a little bit more simple. So how really the human mind works? Every single time I look at the way things are designed, whether that's a physical space, whether that's an app, whether that's a website, whether that's even a bloody jacket that Simon is wearing, it's not really designed in a way that we naturally process environments. It's asking us to change our natural ways of thinking, our natural ways in which our perception works. It's asking us to move right when we would naturally move left, making it up. But you know what I mean? That just shows it. Why are we doing it to ourselves? aren't our lives hard enough already? Don't we have to think too much already? So let's really come back to the basics of how that mind works and then put those little bits into a design. Okay, so one fundamental thing that everyone seems to be kind of forgetting, except matrix fans maybe, there's no reality unless it's in your mind. We can pretend there is, but even if there is, it doesn't matter. Because what matters is what someone is actually experiencing in their mind. It's their perception of your design. It's their experience that your design is evoking. It's not what you think it is. It's not what 500 other people will think it is. It's them with their sort of way of perceiving the world, with their own assumption, fears, everything else in this particular moment, in this particular physical state. That's what matters. And when you start taking that into account, you can actually design something that makes sense for everyone. So I've chosen this quote because it just kind of describes it beautifully, but also because I absolutely love this book. Everyone knows who All Blacks are? Yeah? Good. Okay, so for those of you who don't, All Blacks are the most successful sports team, not just rugby, a sports team in the last, 100 years, I believe. And this is a book really about their main 15 pillars of their strategy that they developed at the beginning of this century when they've lost World Cup. And they got totally pissed afterwards. I'm not joking, that was actual story. But what this book does also very beautifully is it shows all of those elements of a strategy and it juxtaposes it against other sports team strategies, military and business strategies. And this is a book that you can just read in one go, literally. Same like, for example, Pete Trainor's book, right? You just start reading it and you can't stop. But what it also does very beautifully is when you look at a lot of those pillars, they're very basic human ways of behavior. Really totally evolutionary, really coming back to those, fundamentals of how we are designed as species, really. So that's why I sort of, always put that into my presentations, just to explain. Okay. One fundamental, really, really, really basic thing about how our human mind works is that we aren't rational, and we aren't conscious, and we aren't logical at all. We want to think we are, but we're not. So this is a beautiful stat that some of the cool scientists have counted up in about, I think, in the 90s. So basically, it shows us the power of our subconscious mind. So like the human and cave era, they've been able to run away from a tiger, right? Or a lion or whatever. They've been able to spot food and, and fire whatever, the arrow, something to kill it. That's the 11 million bits per second. If you were about to sort of analyze a situation when the lion is running at you at 40 bits per second, you would be dead about 100,000 times in that second. And it's impossible for us to survive in the world, in the way it's designed, without the power of the subconscious mind. So subconscious mind is more powerful than any computer we know at the moment, but computers and, and softwares are copied, are trying to copy how our brain works, but they still haven't managed, right? So one really fundamental thing when you're sort of designing something is to remember they're not analyzing it consciously. They're not adding 2 to 2. They're not doing pros and cons. They're just perceiving it and acting. But how is that process working when they're perceiving your design to the acting? What's happening in between, right? So first of all, it all starts through the senses. So 11 million bits only come through the senses. You will see there is 6 of them over here, not 5. or as some scientists argue, I think they've got until about 36 by now. But let's keep it till 6, it's easier. So the 6th one is bodily sensations. So that's basically how your muscles are reacting to things like softness and hardness of seats or flooring, or even atmospheric pressure. So those are different receptors than touch, because touch receptors are on the surface. And the receptors are actually for the bodily sensations are inside of your muscles. So let's go a little bit farther. So this is, for example, one of the things you can consider. Everyone knows the Superman pose? Yeah? When you want to feel confident and cool and whatever else and strong, yeah? That's embodied cognition. That's part of the bodily sensations as well. So we always have certain memory in our body. So, and there are certain things that, you know, that have a meaning, certain like Superman pose, or which way we look, or what hand we take when we want to pick up a product, and so on and so on. So about 90% of people are right-handed in the world. Yet whenever you design any ads or anything like that, there usually isn't anything that allows you to interact with the product on the picture. So those scientists, what they've done, there's this amazing scientist, her name is Aradhana Krishna in US, and she does some really cool research around various aspects of sensory perception, especially in advertising, digital images and stuff like that. And what they've basically done is they've put a picture of a yogurt in a nut with either no spoon or a spoon on the right-hand side or on the left-hand side. And generally what they found that if there was a spoon, it was generally better. But if there was a spoon on the same side as your dominant hand, you generally connected with the product more. You wanted to buy it more because why do you think? Why is it happening? Anyone can answer? Sorry? It's more familiar. Okay, that's a good one. What else? There we go. You imagining, right? You have to remember that when we look at something, especially at images of something, we're already manipulating it in our heads. We're either remembering or imagining. We're already interacting with that product, even though our bodies aren't physically interacting, right? So if we can get someone to imagine that they're interacting, it's kind of going to work. Now, the next thing. Why do you think that works? Why do you think that black and white will make us to focus a little bit more on the sort of key product features as opposed to a color one? Anyone can figure it out? Sorry? Who answered that? Good. Do you know about some of those studies?
I've read one or two a while back.
A while back, but you understand the principle. Exactly. Make it a little bit more simple. We hate effort, right? So it kind of works like that. It allows us to focus on things that matter, really, right? You can read all the percentages. This is just an example, so I'm not going to read it. Okay, so another powerful thing, as I was sort of insinuating earlier. Yeah, I know. It's after lunch. It's good. Our brain is as powerful in its experience when it's imagining things as when it's experiencing things, actually. Pretty much it behaves almost exactly the same. The way our brain fires up, how strongly it fires up in particular areas, it's pretty much the same when you're imagining, you're smelling or tasting something, as when you're actually doing it. And that's why your reactions and your actual actions of interaction with a product, ability to buy it, likelihood that you're going to buy it, or how much money you want to spend on it, are going to be almost as strong as, as when you're actually experiencing it. But the key is imagine. How do you get people to imagine? They already do normally when they see any pictures or any call to action. But if you accentuate that, if you invite them to imagine, inspire them to imagine, you can pretty much do online what you're doing offline. Wouldn't that be cool? And you don't have to design digital sense or digital taste, right? You can kind of just make them imagine. That's how our brain works. Okay. That's the one thing that hardly any digital designers consider. It's not what's on the screen. It's sometimes not only what's about, happening in the mind when they perceive the screen, but very much is what's happening around. You can't forget that the fact that, I don't know, they have a heavy phone as opposed to a light one will affect how they perceive what you've designed. You can't forget the fact that when they're sitting on a soft sitting as opposed to a hard one, they will perceive your brand differently. They will interact with your brand in a different way. Therefore, for example, if they sit on a sofa, they might be arguing with your customer service assistants a little bit more. If they're sitting on a hard one, than when they're sitting on a soft one. But equally, for example, if we want to try to sell something to them, it will be much more likely that they will buy it when they're sitting on a soft sitting. Of course, you can't design for those things always, unless you sort of, implementing particular digital products into the physical environments. But you can make certain considerations for it. So, for example, I don't know, that majority of the people will sit on offices when they're using your product. So it's very likely that they will be sitting on fairly hard and uncomfortable seats, usually. So design something that doesn't pisses them off even more, because they're already pissed off and tired and annoyed, right? Design something that's a little bit more friendly and understanding and maybe calming down at the beginning and only then delivering the bad news and then calming down again, right? The standard sandwich feedback. All of those kind of bits and pieces, just think a little bit about what's going to be around in the environment. Is it an awful air conditioning noise? Is there, a music that's already playing, or are you actually designing something with a music? What devices are they using at home, and how the heaviness or lightness of those devices can potentially affect? So who can tell me what heavy means symbolically? Any thoughts are good? Quality. Okay, what else? Expensive. Yeah, what else? Severity. Good, what else? Yeah, love it. What else? Loving it. Any one of you is thinking about that when you're designing? No, right? And then with tech, the lighter something is, the better it is, the more expensive it is, right? But will it mean, for example, that if you're searching on, let's say, for luxury fashion, so Katri will be talking about later, luxury fashion on a light phone, will you perceive the product that's luxury and therefore expensive as better or as worse? That's a question to ask yourself, since we are generally associating heaviness with luxury and expensive. Not something that's considered, right? Another thing, lights. Awful lights in here, but hey, that's another story. And they're all the time in my eyes, but I understand it. But lights are another very interesting thing, is we kind of get it common sense-wise, but we're not really designing for it. And I mean, not even architects or interior designers. I work with some of them, so it's not always that easy to persuade them. But we behave differently in different types of lighting. First of all, majority of the lights in our buildings, for example, it's awful, it's completely unnatural, it's definitely not like sunlight, so it already makes us feel annoyed, drained, tired, pissed off, and everything else, right? Kind of. Cold, unpleasant, not allowing us to connect with other human beings, right? Isolated, all of those things. And they're very often bright, so we're also very socially aware of what's happening and how people are perceiving us. So we feel additionally very, uncomfortable and unpleasant and whatever else. So if you're designing something for an office environment or for an airport or something like that, put yourself in that state. You're quite annoyed and uncomfortable, a little bit, self-conscious. You don't want other people to see you and whatever else. And I'm like, so are you going to do additionally more of that on your design? Or are you going to maybe get them a little bit more relaxed? Maybe make them laugh at the beginning, like the Monzo on my way. I love that. That was so fun. Just even, even the little sort of emotional expression or anything like that, just something to make them feel differently. But at the same time, consider the state, therefore, we are in when there's a little bit more dim lighting. So that study was quite cool. And it basically showed this basic principle that when we in a dim lighting, we are a little bit more desire-led. We are a little bit more impulsive. We do things that are more, sort of evolutionary, more body, driven. Yeah, more visceral rather than supposedly rational. Yeah, it's never entirely rational. So just consider those states when you're designing and how you can contradict those states if that's what you need to do for your product or service, right? Because maybe you can utilize those states on purpose, like bars tend to do, right? They utilize dim lighting so you drink more because you don't behave in a socially conforming manner. You behave by all of your desires and fears and everything else. Another thing, temperature. It's quite chilly over here. Yeah. So we're not connecting as much as we could have if it was nice and warm. So it's actually true that when you have sort of a warmer environment or even sort of emblems of warmth, which could be fireplaces, could be fire, could be warm colors, could be even wool, for example, which is quite nice and warm, could be sun, beach, all of those kind of things, things that mean warm straight away for us. We will naturally connect with people a little bit more because we feel a little bit safer. Yeah? We will be much more willing to interact with others and be a little bit more social because it's not so threatening. But at the same time, we will be also more socially conforming, so we'll be a little bit more aware of certain social rules. Then at the same time, we'll be willing to spend more money, which is good, right? So, you might not necessarily be able to design temperature, but you could potentially input certain emblems within your design. You could at least consider what's an environment that they're going to be using your product in, right? Just a little bit of a thought. Okay, so you're probably not in that state right now, but if you were, you would have probably bought up a little bit more of what I was saying, but anyway, hopefully, that would have been nice. But there was a study done in a Canadian shopping center, and they've basically asked a lot of people, a lot of actual customers in there, about when they've eaten last, how hungry they felt, have they had any snack. It was a shopping center that didn't have any food offerings, so they were safe for that. But they've, of course, checked all of those things, and then they've asked them for their receipts. And they found out, as you can see, that they spent about 64% more, and they've bought about 80% more products than the people that weren't hungry. And it definitely wasn't food. It was fashion and electronics. Who can tell me why it was that? Okay, don't think logically. We think in symbols. People think in symbols. We buy things for their symbolic meaning, not for the actual fact that we need them to, that we need their function or we need them to do something. You don't need another scarf or another dress or another tie or another jacket, Simon, honestly. Yeah. Or another pair of shoes, right? You don't really need it. You don't need another phone, another gadget or anything like that. You buy it for what it represents. So why would you buy more fashion and electronics when you're physically, I mean physically hungry, such a basic evolutionary need? Oh gosh, Simon, read farther, please. Or anyone, just, yeah. Yeah? In what sense? Elaborate.
So, and I know that's my behavior, that I try to get my energy back by buying something else other than drink or eat. And fashion and the feeling that you get from new clothes, this thrill, this jolt of energy. Buying high tech is this jolt of engagement with new technology. So that's this burst of energy that could replace the one we actually get from the calories we inhale.
Okay, so it's filling you up in a different way. Mm-hmm. I'm loving that train of thought. Good. Both of them are good. What else?
You're rushing your decisions because you're hungry.
Yes, that's as well, yeah. Yeah, that could be. What else? Reward. For what? Precisely. Yeah, you're feeling the void, you're being rushed, right? So you're making a little bit less informed decisions, which you generally already do, but it's even less informed because you have less energy to make those decisions. All of those answers are very good and they're completely correct. So, you know, it just, we use things not in a way that we think rationally that we use, and, you know, always remember about the symbol behind them because that's why we really buy them. Always consider, you know, so delivery, people are extremely hungry. Simplify the process twice, right? Make it, you know, even easier to order something because people are pissed off and, you know, they don't have as much sort of decision energy in their brains already, right? Which you are already doing very well. He's not listening to me. He's reading Twitter. See? Okay. So that leads us to that lovely point of make things really, 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 really simple. And when I really mean simple, it means intuitive. So coming back to that first point of mine, making things in a way we already naturally process things, we already think. So we generally have that, that's normally the process. So we perceive something, so there is some kind of sensory stimulus, right? It could be anything. It could be, I don't know, a lighting or something or a phone. Okay, you want to buy a new phone, yeah? So that's your thing. Then you straight away have certain matrix of subconscious associations with it, right? So that could be, for example, new, exciting, fun, really, really needed, all those kind of things. They all pop up. Then you have that emotional and sort of reaction and that physical reaction as well. Then you actually make action, and only then you kind of start to realize what the heck just happened. Yeah? And that action can even involve buying. Some people are that subconscious. You know, that's generally how it happens. And when you start sort of considering that process and understanding even that basic first step, so what are those subconscious associations with certain things? So like, for example, colors that you're using, or the size of the font or a button or whatever else. The placement of, you know, of that button or the placement of an information or a menu bar. You know, all of those kind of things are very natural to us. We look in a certain way at, you know, at the world. And if you ask us to look in a different way, that's very effortful. So start coming back to those, you know, really basic things. But at the same time, as those of you who know Pete Traynor, he would say that, some friction is good, assuming that that's part of your brand personality. If friction, if making people think, if making them do something, if making them to earn the right to buy your product or own your product is something that it's part of your proposition, and that's why people buy you, then make it even more effortful. But you can only do it by understanding how people normally already make things effortless. Does it make sense? A little bit? So, yeah, so that's basically what I kind of meant. Simple, you know, quite easy, quite automatic, almost, you know, so to make things almost subconscious, so people just kind of do it, and then they, oh, I've just ordered food, great, you know, type of thing. And it just arrived at my door, almost to that point. And of course, they will still know roughly what they're doing, but we want to make it so they don't have to think, because thinking demands a lot of energy and a lot of effort, and we're already doing way too much of it during the day, right? Okay, one of those things is, it's a very simple example. It was a study done on some of the online shopping. And, you know, like online shopping, we tend to generally go and sort of look for fairly, you know, typical product, right? Unless we're just browsing, yeah? Does it make sense? Who's looking for typical products over here, like specific ones, when they're shopping online? You just browsing, just for fun? Just for entertainment? All of you? No, you are looking, okay. So assuming you're looking for a specific product and you roughly know what you want, but not entirely. So I've chosen a red dress. I love red, as some people that know me know. And you eventually sort of, you know, end up with this whole website or, you know, or even a phone, you know, a line of sameness. Basically, that's what it looks like. You can't differentiate things, and it's already quite effortful to, you know, to differentiate it. So what they've done in the studies looked at, you know, what if we just show one picture of a product, like initially before you get to the whole sort of product description, or even if we get there, how about we don't show everything, like the first example, you just have an arrow, so you intuitively know there's more, but you don't necessarily have to look at it if you don't want to, right? Rather than this one at the bottom, where you still have arrows, but at the same time, your brain perceives all the other 5 images that it has at the bottom, right? So, you know, what they basically found out is that you generally feel even less like there is a difference between a product. So you're being less attracted to this product. You're being less willing to actually buy them. You have a lower preference for those products, and you see the numbers. But therefore, you're sort of getting more tired and more annoyed, and that annoyance, unfortunately, passes subconsciously into the brand. So just thinking about how we can make things a little bit easier to, you know, to navigate. Or that. I hope there's no one from Debenhams over here. Yeah, but this is a beautiful example. I'm like, come on. Anyone knows what the heck is there? I'm like, do you even want to press any button farther than that? No, I don't definitely want to. But there was an actual study that they've done, and what they found out is they took 18, 9, and 3 categories, sort of subcategories under, you know, on the menu website menus. And what they found is basically sort of an inverted U sort of relationship. So when you have 18, it wasn't really working. When you had 3, it wasn't really working. But when you had 9, the results were much better. So you felt like, you know, it was a little bit more pleasurable, and you felt that the brand was nicer and whatever else, right? And what? Yeah. Nice attitudes, all of those stuff. And you'll be much more willing to sort of continue on the relationship. And it's the same principle. It's easier to process. It's like, you know, when you sort of walk into a store and you see a sea of sameness, right? You're not going to really go in and further, you know, look through it, right? Unless you're totally in a hunting mode and you go to TK Maxx, then it's fine, right? But otherwise, you generally won't. And the same thing goes over here. You just see a sea of, you know, like so much stuff to process, you just can't be bothered anymore. that's really not what we're supposed to be designing, right? Things should be easier. Like there is this new app which has been done recently. I think it's called Style AI or something. And you basically can take like a picture of your sort of outfit and it analyzes roughly what you like. And it's starting to propose other typical, similar products. And it sort of understands a style, color, brand, blah, 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 and all those kind of things. Maybe putting a version of that rather than that category search will be something easier. Because we don't think in words normally. Like we kind of do, but because we are taught that since an early, childhood. But our brain doesn't actually processes things in words. It processes them in mental models, right? Those are images, those are smells, those are taste, those are, tactile aspects. Those are much stronger senses than any, word can give you or any sort of, even sound is more important. Okay, that's basically it. That's just my motto for my company. That's kind of what I do. Okay, any questions?
Well, hold on.